Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you one more piece of evidence that totally falsifies evolution yet again, and how our model far better explains the data. You see, there are two major views when it comes to answering the diversity of life question: young Earth creation and deep time evolution. We both have the exact same evidence, but view them entirely different. So I ask you to set aside emotion and just look at the data, what it shows, and make up your own mind based on the evidence and nothing else. I am going to show you why our view of the past is far better than evolution, and how it not only better answers what we see, but solves the paradoxes that evolution theory runs into. Let me break it down for you this way. When we look into the mitochondria, we go to a specific region called the CO1 gene compartment, also known as cytochrome C. We find that the region is highly conserved, but still accrues mutations rather quickly. When mutations do arise, they do not always mutate in the same spot. This is really good, because it allows us to know what sequences have mutated and which ones have not. Therefore, we can know exactly what are mutations and what are not mutations, so we know what the original sequence looked like. So, how does all this fit together? Well, it comes down to predictions.
It was Nathaniel Jensen who predicted that if we looked in the mitochondria, that we would find nowhere near the amount of mutations expected if 7 million years of time had passed. That was predicted in 2015 and published in 2017 in his book Replacing Darwin. So the predictions were laid out and in print. Now it was time to test which model made the best prediction. Over time, mutations build up in the mitochondria. If deep time evolution is true, then we would expect to find the mitochondria completely saturated in mutations. If young Earth creation is true, then we would only find a few mutations. This is based on how fast the mutation rate in this region is, and we would expect to find 21,457 mutations would have built up in this region over that amount of time. This means we should find complete mutation saturation of 12,000 mutations in the mitochondria. We are not even remotely close to equilibrium. I decided to run these same numbers on a highly conserved region of the mitochondria called the CO1 gene, and I got the exact same results. Nowhere near the amount of mutations have occurred, and nowhere near mutation saturation. We find a fast mutation rate and few mutations. This can only mean one thing: young Earth creation is true, and the genetic evidence supports this.
This was discovered in 2018 in the Rockefeller University study that showed clear genetic boundaries. And in that same study, we noticed when we look at humans, we find up to 10 mutations have occurred in this region in some people. When we look at chimpanzees, we find the average is about 65 mutations. So now, let's use the evolutionary timeline and take that back. Not just 200,000 years, when they believe that there was a global ice age that caused a bottleneck to occur, but let's keep going, back 6 to 7 million years, to this elusive split between the human and chimpanzee line. Look at how many mutations would have occurred over that vast amount of time. There's plenty of time for there to be tons of differences between us and them, yet there are so few. They have even admitted that this paradox is perplexing to them. We can read it right here. Unlike our closest genetic relatives, chimps, all humans have virtually identical DNA. In fact, one group of chimps can be more genetically diverse than all 6 billion humans alive today. It is thought we split from a common ancestor with chimpanzees 5 to 6 million years ago, which is more than enough time for substantial genetic differences to develop. So why haven't they? Well, if young Earth creation is true, we would have God creating a fully functional mitochondria, and just a few thousand years until the flood, and just 5,000 years or so until current day. So what makes more sense with the data? It should be obvious. But because evolution is not allowed to view history through the biblical lens of creation, they will never solve their paradox. And this is just one in the long line of problems with evolution theory, and they will never be able to solve it.
The evolutionary community even admits that this discovery confounds the prediction made that we should see much more genetic diversity, yet we don't. How have evolutionists tried to deal with and explain this destructive evidence that's against them? Well, it has been ignored overall, with the exception of an atheist blogger who goes by Evograd, and one of the biggest critics of Dr. Nathaniel Jensen's work. After reading his critique, he literally had nothing to save the science. He actually admits that there is far too many differences compared to what we observe. This is why he wrote an entire essay dedicated to both griping about Dr. Nathaniel Jensen's chart showing 21,457 mutations as where we can only see 12,000 mutations, and how often these mutations occur regarding a particular position. This is how desperate they are. Not only did he miss the entire point of why Jensen put those numbers on the chart to begin with, because it is not that we should see that many mutations. It is the fact that Jensen says that many mutations total should have occurred over that amount of time, and that it is clear that we would find mutation saturation. Not that we would find 21,457 mutations when looking at the mitochondria. This is what you get when you have critics who are emotionally responding to something because they are dead set against it. Overall, he ignores the actual problems and hand waves the topic away altogether because of the fact that it is yet again another failed prediction and falsification of evolution. His goal clearly was trying to make everyone reading focus on both Jensen as a person and not the argument itself. This is why he did not answer it, because it cannot be answered in the evolutionary community. As they begrudgingly admit, evolution is unfalsifiable nonsense that is so plastic it can use any evidence for it, and nothing discovered will ever be good enough to falsify it because it's complete pseudoscience. This is why schools teach so little evolutionary science, because it is known as a soft science, all based on hypothetical assumptions about the past using historical science rather than observational. And they even admit that over the last 100 years, biology itself has progressed without any help from evolution theory. None of the fields from molecular biology, biochemistry, physiology don't even take evolution into account at all. Evolution theory really is the origin of nonsense. It holds back actual progress in many fields, and this is why the NIH, or the National Institute of Health, the largest health organization on Earth, uses the biblical young Earth creation model called Mendel's Accountant, created by young Earth creationists Dr. John Sanford, Robert Carter, and John Baumgartner. If evolution was true, why would they not use some evolutionary program based on the rate of mutation effects and proliferation spreading through a population over deep evolutionary time? Instead, they used the rate of fast mutation spread through the population, which was predicted by us young Earth creationists. They clearly do not care about the creation versus evolution debate. They just care about what works, and what works is the biblical creation model.
We know that Denisovan, Neanderthal, and modern-day man all met one another and interacted. Therefore, that immediately rules out interacting with them before a bottleneck, because, according to evolution, modern humans didn't even exist to interact with. Therefore, we have the smoking gun refuting evolution, and that all of these people were just living together at the same time, and mutation rates show us that there is no possible way that they could have lived before the bottleneck, since they were all on the same side of the bottleneck together, and mutations all line up and take us right back to the same bottleneck together. Now we know that the high amount of mutation accumulation that we see in us and them had to all take place after the bottleneck. And this fits perfectly with what we've been saying all along, based on what we know about isolation, divergence, and population size. So the genetic boundary already existed at the bottleneck. It is the boundary of the genetic differences that separate different kinds. This boundary cannot be bridged by just assuming common ancestry is true and using imagination to bridge these gaps and go back in time before a bottleneck. Then presume something that we've never seen happen today happened back then, such as a common ancestor splitting into different animal families. Believing a split between humans and chimps happened is fine, but it's faith-based and without evidence. As I stated earlier, that if it were true, there would be far more differences if this split actually happened in the deep past. We just don't see that. Nor do we see this convergence in the deep past with any of these so-called splits. Take Miacids, for example, which supposedly split into dogs, bears, cats, mongoose, skunks, otters, badgers, raccoons, hyenas, weasels, polecats, and even aquatic walruses and seals. The genetic convergence doesn't exist for any of these. There is no evidence for it, and there never will be. Do not be deceived. So again, even if this evolutionary scenario of common ancestry was true, there would be no way of proving it, since there is no possible way to connect ancestry to anything past a bottleneck event. And even they were forced to admit that a global bottleneck genetic reset had to have occurred. So they are stuck ever being able to prove common ancestry because of it. So they had to save their dying theory by invoking something else that also destroys their theory. That's evolution for you. So, what has genetic testing using DNA barcoding exposed in the last 5 years? Well, it has validated the young Earth creation position of independent lines of ancestry with genetic boundaries that should not exist if evolution was true. It also confirms scripture, which states that a global bottleneck happened, even killing the aquatic life on Earth. Evolution never predicted this, and originally stated it did not happen. When the undeniable genetic evidence finally confirmed that it did, they went looking in their own made-up fossil record created by an atheist with an agenda, and they found nothing. The absence of transitional fossils that should be everywhere in the fossil record, if it was true, is another telltale sign that the story is another myth based on imagination and lies. We see fast mutation rates, low genetic diversity, independent lines of ancestry with genetic boundaries, and biological evidence of a global bottleneck inside of all life on Earth. All of this only points to one conclusion: the young Earth creation biblical model of ancestry. There's no way around it. So the case for independent origins versus common ancestry is really a dead issue. The sad part is that people think evolution is science, and it's not. It's anti-science, because it doesn't allow competing theories. It is also unfalsifiable. It also doesn't make predictions, even on mutations which the theory is based on. And it can't even predict what anything is going to evolve into because the theory is so plastic that they will just say, well, anything can happen. The only reason it hangs on is because it's protected by law. It's sad that kids will only hear one side of a horrible argument, the side that is nothing but a made-up lie invented for an agenda that tells them that they are related to the very strawberry that they are eating for lunch. Imagine that.
There's a reason intelligent design isn't taught in our learning institutions. The legal staff of Freedom from Religion Foundation, a church-state watchdog group, has had remarkable success in convincing many institutions, such as school boards and town councils, that they are breaking constitutional law when they sponsor sectarian activities. That includes intelligent design. When the authorities can't be convinced, Freedom from Religion Foundation sues, and it wins more often than not.
If you want your kids to learn real science and want to get young Earth creation taught at your local school, then look no further than Curriculum in Crisis. My book was created for one reason and one reason only: to get your local public school to teach a better model than evolution, one that better explains the genetic diversity of life we see on Earth today. This book will teach you how and why it's so important to get biblical creation into your local public schools so kids do not grow up believing a lie that ruins their minds forever.